Voir examination of August Schuette, Day 2. Voir examination by Attorney Kratz. Question. Mr. Schuette, good afternoon. My name is Ken Kratz. I'm the Calumet County District Attorney. I'm serving as a special prosecutor in this case. Joining me this afternoon is Tom Fallon. Mr. Fallon is an Assistant Attorney General. He is also a special prosecutor on this case. And we will not only be asking you questions this afternoon, but we'll be presenting the case together, if you are selected to serve on that. This part of the jury selection process is meant to follow up individually with questions that you have answered on a questionnaire. Let me assure you that it's not meant to unnecessarily pry into your personal life or to embarrass you. We're simply trying to get the most impartial jury that we can, and so there are a couple of follow-up questions that we do need to ask of you. Let me first start, Mr. Schuette, with your prior employment. I understand that you're a retired gentleman, but had served and had worked what looks like most of your life in the retail store business. Is that correct? Answer, that's correct. Question, you were president and manager of a department store. Was that here in Manitowoc? Answer, yes, it was, sir. Question, could you describe the nature of that store, please? What kind of goods was it that you sold? Answer, it was a general department store, established as a family department store, established in 1849, a long time ago, and our family ran it for about 145 years. And it sold just a general classification of merchandise, men's and women's wear, home furnishings, appliances, and, at one time, groceries. Question, when was it, sir, that you retired from that business? Answer, 1992. Question, and upon your retirement, was that business sold or was it carried on by other family members or other concerns? Answer, the business was acquired by my stepson-in-law, Peter Burback, and he ran it for 2 years and then he closed it in 1994. Question, I understand also from your questionnaire that you have some higher education, including college and graduate school. Is that correct? Answer, correct. Question, the area of graduate studies, what was that in, business and management, or was that in some other kind of area? Answer, it was a work-study course at the City College in New York. I worked in a department store and went to classes. Question, all right. So what would now be called an internship or something like that? Answer, yes. Question, but you also received some kind of educational credit for that. Is that right? Answer, correct. Work and educational credit. Question, all right. Also indicates in your questionnaire that you served in our armed forces. Is that right? Answer, that's correct. Question, you served in Germany at least through 1946 and attained, as I understand it, the rank of sergeant? Correct. Answer, correct. Question, and as a sergeant, I believe you were stationed in Germany at that time? Answer, right. Question, did that require you to have supervisory responsibilities over other soldiers? Answer, yes. I obtained the rank of sergeant and I had, I think, 6 men under me, 6 other men that worked with me. We were in charge of some of the armors, some of the weapons and ammunition and that type of thing, and several ammunition dumps in Berlin. Question, as a member of the armed services, Mr. Schuette, did you ever have the situation of being involved in any investigation proceedings or court-martial proceedings or anything where you may have either been called upon as a witness or some other manner participated in those kinds of proceedings? Answer, no, I did not. Question, have you ever been a witness in a case before in a criminal or a civil case in court? Answer, I have not. Question, I note from your questionnaire that you are pretty active in obtaining information. Let me ask you, Mr. Schuette, where do you think you obtain most of your news from? Would it be the newspaper or television or the internet or some combination? Answer, newspaper primarily and television news reports. I also We also follow that. Question. Do you subscribe to the local newspapers here? Answer. Correct, I do. Question. And are you a regular reader of that? Answer. I feel I am, yes. Question. And do you watch your television, at least the news portion of television, regularly? Answer. Generally, yes, I do. Question. With that having been said, have you some background information of this case that is the reason that you have been called in today? Answer. Well, I think anybody who does read the newspapers, local papers, and watches the television stations certainly has to have some feeling about the news in general coming out of this community. Question. Right. Answer. So I certainly have, I wouldn't say I have intently watched or read about this case, but I certainly have done some. I have some awareness of it. Question. Okay, let me go back about 15 months to November of 2005. Do you remember some of the early reports of a young photographer, a young woman, Miss Hallbuck, being missing, that there was a search for her and some law enforcement efforts to find her? Do you remember those stories? Answer. Yes, I was aware of some of them, yes. Question. Were you also made aware sometime thereafter of Mr. Stephen Avery's involvement and eventually his arrest or being implicated in Miss Hallbuck's disappearance? Answer. Yes, I would have been aware of that. Question. Let me ask you this, Mr. Schuette. After being aware early on in this case, at any time, did you form an opinion as to Mr. Avery's guilt or innocence? Or are you the kind of person, generally and specifically in this case, did you reserve judgment on that to wait to hear more about the case? Answer. I would be inclined to want to hear more about it. Question. Now, I asked kind of a two-part question. I apologise for that. Is that generally your philosophy? That is, about things you read in not only the newspaper or hear on television, but any information that you might glean from some source. You are the kind of person that will want to check into the details yourself before forming an opinion about them? Answer. I would feel I would. I think in my business career, I was not quick to jump to conclusion. I'm not an impulsive type person, so I think I'm inclined to try and get all the facts in business or in other news. Question. Now, running a business for, I think you said 45 years if I'm... Answer. Worked there 45, ran it 35. Question. If I'm reading this correctly, that required, I suspect, a great deal of not only hard work in the amount of hours, but also attention to detail. Would that be a fair assumption on my part? Answer. Correct. Yes. Question. How many employees at any given time did you have under you? Answer. Oh, full and part-time 40, approximately 40, 30 or 40. Question. And I suspect by the nature of the retail business, some of those individuals came and went. In other words, it wasn't the same 40 people. There were... Answer. No, it wasn't. Question. There were individuals in retail sales that would move on to other employment. Answer. Correct. Question. Is that right? I notice in your questionnaire that you're familiar with the internet. Let me ask you if you're an active user on the internet and how often and what kinds of purposes you might use the computer for. Answer. I'm really not too active in the internet. I do have a computer. I do have availability to the internet. Seems though I use my computer mainly for word processing, spreadsheets, email. I really don't delve into the internet too much, except for maybe informational purposes. Question. All right. Answer. Not news necessarily. Not news, but... Question. I have to ask Mr. Schuette, the spreadsheets, database, or things like that, are you still employed now, or what? What is it that you are making databases of at this point? Answer. Data spreadsheets and letter writing, that type of thing. Question. All right. Answer. And I use it mainly for tax information, checkbook information, that type of thing. Question. I understand. All right. Answer. I don't really... Question. So you keep some of your more detailed records on the computer? Answer, sorry? Question, I notice from your response that you have many children, all of which, if I read correctly, have either college or advanced degrees. One of them, it looks like, is in the radio or media business. Am I reading that correctly? Answer, correct. Question, can you tell me what that child does and where they're employed? Answer, yes. He is a stepson. I have a second marriage. My wife was a widow and I was a widower. We have been married for 26 years. Her oldest child, David Collith, is a general manager of a public radio station in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Question. All right. Have you and your stepson either discussed this case specifically or do you discuss the media business generally with him? Answer. No, we really don't. I don't recall that we have discussed this case. I know we have not recently, and I don't recall if he might have casually mentioned it a year and a half ago. And we don't see David that often, so we don't discuss the radio business. Question. All right, I understand. Being a very long-time member of the Manitowoc community, have you formed an opinion about the Sheriff's Department and what kind of job you feel that the Sheriff's Department here in Manitowoc is doing? I guess, generally, in fighting crime or just in their day-to-day operations. Have you formed such an opinion? Answer. Well, my opinion would be positive. As far as I know, I think they are doing a commendable job. I'm not aware that they are doing anything but that, so it would be positive. Question. You may, in fact, if you are called to testify, in this case, you will hear from law enforcement officers who will be asked to testify. Let me ask you, Mr. Schuette, since law enforcement officers are people like anybody else and subjected to the same biases or prejudices as anybody else, are you able, despite your positive general reaction towards officers, to consider a law enforcement officer's testimony like that of any other witness? Answer, like what? Question, like that of any other witness that might testify. Are you able to consider their testimony and not give them more credit or less credit just because they are a police officer? Answer, well, I think I would accept whatever they say in a general mode. I respect the police officers. I think that they should be thorough and investigate things well, so I would certainly respect what they have to say. Question. Is there anything that you have learned from this case specifically that you have a question either about the nature of the investigation, the thoroughness of it, or anything that's come to light that as you sit here today, you think that we should know going into this case? Answer, no, I don't. Question. Ms. Schuette, have you ever used or are you aware of a publication known as Auto Trader magazine? Answer, no, I'm not. Question. Have you ever heard of a project in the state of Wisconsin which is called Project Innocence? A project which is, or has at least as its primary goal, the exoneration of those individuals who have been wrongly accused or convicted? Answer. Yes, I am aware of that program. Question. Do you believe that this is a positive, that it is a good program? Answer. I would think that would be a positive, yes. Question. Are you aware of Mr. Avery's past connection with Project Innocence? Answer. Correct, I am. Question. Can you tell me what you recall of Mr. Avery, and not just the Project Innocence, but what you may know of his past, generally, that may help us in some of our future questions? Answer. Well, I'm aware of his conviction and a prior offence. I'm aware of the fact that he serves a substantial amount of time in prison, and I'm aware that Project Innocence pursued this and he was released from prison. It was determined another person committed the crime for which Stephen Avery was convicted. Question. And he was exonerated, that is, he was freed as a result of? Answer. Correct. Question. Of that project? Answer. I'm aware of that, yes. Question. Were you aware of the nature of the exoneration? That is, it was based upon DNA or scientific evidence? Answer. Yes, I think I was aware of that. That was the way in which he was exonerated. Question. I'm going to ask you, just generally, Mr. Schuette, are you a believer in the sciences, specifically in DNA evidence? And from what you have heard or read, do you believe that to be an accurate form of identification, especially in criminal cases? Answer. From what I understand, yes. I am aware of that and seems as though it is a true scientific project. Question. The last question I have of you, Mr. Schuette, is as you have thought about sitting on this case, have you thought about one of the 12 members of your community that may have to sit in judgment of Mr. Avery? Do you believe that would be a positive experience for you individually, or is it that something that you would not be looking forward to? Answer. I'm sure it would be a positive experience. I can't honestly say I would look forward to it, but in the event that I would be chosen, I think I could render a fair and carefully deliberate reasoning to arrive at whatever result would be arrived at. Question. And would you be willing to follow whatever instructions the judge may have on the law in this case? Answer. Yes, I would. Attorney Kratz. That's all the questions I have of this prospective juror. Thank you, Judge. The Court. Mr. Buting. Mr. Buting. Thank you, Judge. Voir dire examination by Mr. Buting. Question. Good afternoon, Mr. Schuette. My name is Jerome Buting. This is Dean Strang, and this is obviously Stephen Avery, and you recognise that we are representing him today. Answer. Correct. Question. Okay. I have some questions about some things that Mr. Kratz hasn't talked about, and also have some follow-up on some things that he has. Okay? You have obviously been a member of this community a long time, and as president of a department store, I apologise, but I'm not from here, so I'm not familiar with the store. But as a result of that position in the community, were you on leadership councils or chambers of commerce or things of that nature? Answer, yes. I was involved with a number of organisations, yes. Question, could you just tell me what those were in leadership positions? Answer, well, the Chamber of Commerce, I was on the board of directors, Junior Chamber of Commerce. I was on the board of directors. There's a foundation called the West Foundation, of which I was the vice president. I was involved in the Manitowoc County Historical Society on the board of directors. I'm trying to think if there were any more, but I have been a downtown Manitowoc Retail Trade Commission of downtown Manitowoc, Chamber of Commerce. I've just been pretty much involved with a lot of the community affairs. I'm on the Rotary Club right now. Question, you're on the Rotary Club? Answer, I'm a Rotarian, correct. Question, and do you attend regularly? What, once a month? Answer, well, hopefully weekly. Question, once a week? Okay. Answer, it's a weekly meeting, yes. Question, okay. And in that context, do you ever hear people talking about this case? Answer, on occasion, but, I don't hear a lot of it. I suppose there will be more now, but no, I do not hear a lot of that discussed. Question, okay. You still play tennis? Answer, I still play tennis. Question, good for you. And you mentioned volunteer work. What kind of volunteer work do you do? Answer, I do Meals on Wheels. Question, okay. Answer, 2, and I volunteer at the Historical Society in their building, and they have a very nice historical village out in the country. I help transport some people who need some help, some stroke victims, mainly stroke victims, who need to get to an exercise place. I used to help an elderly gentleman with most of his grocery shopping and doctors and that type of thing. He is no longer with us, but I do that type of volunteer work. Question, so it sounds like you keep pretty busy. Answer, I keep quite busy. Question, and do you also travel out of town for long periods of time, or are you primarily here year-round? Answer, we have a small place up in Door County, so summers, long weekends, we spend up there. Question, okay. Answer, we no longer make long travel trips out of the state or out of the country. We did it one time, but not too much anymore. We kind of stick around home. Question, okay. You don't try and go someplace warmer in the winter? Answer, oh, I love Manitowoc. I love blowing snow. Question, okay. Now you have 6 children or stepchildren? Answer, correct. Question, grandchildren? Answer, 10. Question, 10. Okay. And granddaughters, all boys or girls? Answer, let's see, I should know. 2 granddaughters and, no, 3 granddaughters. So would be 7 grandsons. Question, okay. And what's the range of ages of all of your grandchildren? Answer, the oldest must be 24 and the youngest is 7. Question, okay. And what age are your granddaughters? Answer, 16, 14 and 12. Question, okay. So not in the middle 20s, not close to... Answer, no. Question, Teresa Hallbuck's age or anything of that sort? Answer, correct. Question, okay. When you heard about this case, did you identify it with your granddaughters at all? What would it be like if this happened to my granddaughter? Anything of that nature? Answer, no, I did not. Question, in your questionnaire, you mention, well, let me get to that in a second. Sounds like you keep pretty current on all the news from a number of different sources, right? Answer, I try to. Question, do you have an opinion about how accurate the media is reporting on, particularly criminal cases? Answer, sometimes I feel that they don't get the whole story. I'm sure they aren't really complete in all of the facts. I think they do the best they can, and sometimes the facts aren't really easily available, and maybe they shortcut some of them. Question, do you find yourself watching the local news more than the cable, like CNN or Fox News outlets, or do you watch those too? Answer, we watch those also. We pretty much watch the local news, channel 2 or 5, the 5 o'clock news or the 6 o'clock news, or whatever fits our time schedule. Question, do you tend to watch a particular program in the evening like, the Bill O'Reilly show or Larry King or any of those kinds of things? Answer, we watch some of those, Riley or Larry King. Question, anyone that's a particular favourite? Answer, not really. I think as far as Larry King is concerned, depends on who he's having on. Sometimes it's interesting information, sometimes it's pretty boring, so we skip around. Question, and how about radio news? Do you listen to the radio much? Answer, probably WMT, the local news station, maybe at the early broadcast, the 7 a.m. broadcast. Question, now, that station does have some call-in shows, doesn't it? Answer, sure. Question, have you ever called into any of the radio stations? Answer, no, I have not. I don't listen to those too much. Question, now, you have been in this community for... Answer, all my life. Question, all your life? Answer, right. Question, and you have never had jury duty before? Answer, I have not, no. Question, you ever talked to the jury clerk about that? Answer, no, I have not. Question, how that ever happen? Answer, no, my wife has been called 4 times. Question, has she really? Answer, yeah. Question, okay, has she ever served? Answer, on 1 case, I believe. Question, speaking of your wife, you mention her, that's Shirley, right? Answer, correct. Question, okay, one of the questions we asked, number 41, was whether you have talked with any people at length about this particular case, and you said yes, your spouse. Answer, mm-hmm. Question, what sort of things have you talked about, or what have you talked about with her? Answer. Well, I just think a general opinion about the whole situation, and I would think it's pretty hard for anybody who keeps a little bit abreast of the news here to overlook this whole case. I would think. Question. Sure. Answer. It would have to be. And so just, maybe what happened today or when the news comes on, we might casually discuss it. Question. And I don't mean to imply there's anything at all wrong with talking to your spouse about it. Answer. No. I'm pretty sure it's pretty normal for. Question. Sure. Answer. It would be a little hard for somebody not to talk. Question. Sure. Especially something like this. Answer. Sure. Question. But obviously I assume you probably respect your spouse's opinion on things as well, right? Answer. In most cases, yes. Question. Not necessarily all, but? Answer. Correct, not all. Question. Does she have a particular opinion about whether or not Mr. Avery is guilty or innocent? Answer. Well, for some reason, she kind of questions his guilt. Question. Okay. Answer. She just. Question. And does she? Have you talked with her further about that to see if you agree or disagree with those doubts that she still has? Answer. No, not really. This is her opinion. She just doesn't feel that she's convinced that this is a guilty situation. Question. Okay. And what about you? Do you have any? Answer. I don't. I don't strong at this point. I think, as I mentioned, I don't strongly disagree with her. I think there are probably a lot of questions to be answered, and so I'm not totally convinced that the case has been presented totally. And I think if I serve on the jury, I would like to see, and I'm sure both sides would be presented. Question. And you? Answer. So I'm not adamant as to what the guilt or not innocence is. Question. So you understand that at this point Mr. Avery is presumed innocent though, right? Answer. Absolutely. Question. And despite all would it be fair to say that the media presentation that you have seen, you would have seen a lot of it has skewed more towards making him look guilty? Answer. Probably, yes. Question. Okay. And despite all of that, do you think you can still presume him innocent? Answer. I feel I could, yes. Question. Is that because you realise they are probably not giving you the whole story? Answer. Correct. Question. Okay. And I recognise that, well, that's the most recent thing you can recall hearing reported on the news about this particular case? Answer. I really haven't been following much in the last 2 or 3 weeks as requested by the judge, but very frankly, it's pretty hard to avoid the headlines. Question. Sure. Answer. Sunday's Herald Times had a very big section about the whole case and the chronological order dates. I did not read it, but I did not miss the headline. Question. I have discovered some restrooms that you go into. You're standing there and you can't miss it. It's posted on the wall. Answer. That could be. That's right. It's pretty hard. Or the 5 o'clock news on Channel 2. It's our lead story is, and the name Avery comes up. And generally, I will either leave the room or turn it off or something. And I'm not a pursuit, but I'm trying to at least follow the judge's recommendations. I'm trying to think what the most recent thing would be. Last month? Question. Do you recall discussions about a blood vial? Answer. Yes. Yes. There was something about that. I didn't pursue the whole thing. It was something about DNA evidence, and there was a blood vial someplace. It was used, well, I think it was used to exonerate him from his original conviction. Question. And that it was locked in the clerk's office? Answer. Yeah. I'm not sure quite how that whole thing happened, how they found it. Question. Now, I'm going to get back to something on that in a minute, but before I forget, I want to ask you, you mentioned your awareness that Mr. Avery was wrongly convicted. Answer. Yes. Question, and spent a substantial period of time in prison. Answer, correct. Question, and, in fact, it was determined that another person had committed that crime. Answer, yes. Question, and do you have any doubts of your own about whether or not that's true, that he was really wrongly committed? Answer, no. Question, convicted? Answer, I did not have any doubt about that. Question, and how do you feel about, or how did you feel when you learned that somebody from your community in Manitowoc, where you have grown up all your life, had been wrongly convicted? Answer, it's a tragedy. It's a shame. What else can you say? Question, sure. Answer, a young man's 20 years of his life was wasted. Question, you're also aware of a civil lawsuit that was filed? Answer, yes, I am. Question, are you aware of the individuals that were directly accused in the lawsuit of misconduct leading to his wrongful conviction? Answer, not at all of them. I remember the sheriff, Tom Kasurik, I think was involved in that. I'm not sure. I don't know who the district attorney was at that time, so I suppose he was. Question, well, I noticed in your questionnaire you mentioned when we asked about people that long listed of names that you might know, you mentioned Thomas Kasurik. Answer, correct. Question, and how do you know him? Answer, very casually. Question, okay. Answer, the business I was in, we met. Maybe I sold Tom a pair of socks or a suit or something sometime. So I have known him on a very casual basis, a name recognition and... Question, okay, I see. Answer, that's about all. Question, so no personal knowledge of him? Answer, not at all, no. Question, did you ever talk to him about the Stephen Avery wrongful conviction? Answer, no. Question, nothing of that sort? Answer, no, not at all. Question, and you also mentioned Kurt Drum? Answer, mm-hmm. Question, how do you know him? Answer, he's been a friend of the family. I think he's my daughter's age. I have known him since kindergarten and I have known his father and mother for a long time. Question, now, if he were to testify, and I don't know that he will, you recognise a lot of these people on this list are not necessarily all going to testify, thankfully, but would you be able to be objective and judge what he would testify about? Answer, you mean Kurt Drum? Question, yes. Answer, yes, I certainly could accept his forthrightness and honesty, yes. Question, could you also judge him like any other witness, or would you be maybe too sympathetic towards him because it's somebody you know that you would assume he is not going to lie? I won't go beyond that. Answer, no, I don't think I would have any personal interest in his testimony or consider him differently than any other witness. Question, okay, and I assume that applies to Tom Kasurik too? Answer, correct. Question, now, one of the things Mr. Kratz asked you about was police officers and whether you would be willing to consider their testimony as witnesses like any other witness. Do you recall that? Answer, yes, I do. Question, do you think, though, that because police officers are, they are sworn to serve and protect, enforce the law, that if they were to take the witness stand and take the oath, that they therefore would be more likely to tell the truth than an ordinary citizen, or would it be the same? Answer, well, I hope more likely. I would hope. Question, okay, but now, if the judge gave you an instruction that said, despite what you may hope, they are the same as any other witness and they are human beings, that you must judge their credibility, their truthfulness, or non-truthfulness the same as any other witness, Would you be able to do that? Answer, oh, sure. Question, okay. You did say, I think, and maybe I just misunderstood you. You said, I think I would respect what they have to say, but if you got that kind of an instruction from the judge, I assume you would be able to also question what they say just as any other witness. Is that right or not? Or would you just respect and accept what they say unquestionably? Answer, well, I suppose if what they respond, their responses seem to be logical, I would accept it as being truthful. But no, I would certainly, I don't know if I would give a police officer any more credibility than any other witness. Question, okay, because as a juror, if you're selected, you will have to do that. You will have to, you may hear, I'm not saying necessarily police officers, but you may hear different things from different witnesses. And you may have to judge which one am I going to believe. And it could be a police officers. It may not be, but that's a task you may find yourself having to do. Answer, I would understand that, yes. Question, okay. You also said that you expected police to be thorough, right? Answer, in general, I would expect them to, yes. Question, okay. And if you hear evidence that questions or challenges whether or not the police officers were very thorough in this case, in looking at all of the evidence and all of the options and possibilities, would you be able to consider that? Answer, sure, yes. Question, do you think the police sometimes get so engaged personally in an investigation that they may tend to go down one tunnel and, focus on one area rather than being as objective as possible and covering all the bases? Do you think that's possible? Answer, I think if I would get contrary information that seems logical, I would have to weigh this and accept it if that would be the case. Question, okay, I appreciate that. And if you also heard evidence or reason to think that maybe the police went even farther into this case and crossed the line and, were doing things that were improper and possibly even illegal, would you be able to consider that? Answer, I would be able to, if the evidence so indicates, yes. Question, now, since I don't remember no, I don't think Mr. Kratz did ask about this. You talked about the initial sort of flood of information when Teresa Hallbuck was missing, and then Mr. Avery was arrested. Do you also, though, recall the whole Brendan Dassey aspect of the case? Answer, I'm aware of some of the media coverage of him. Yes. Question, okay. Did you see any of the press conferences when those charges were brought? Answer, no, I did not. Question, back in March? Okay. Answer, no. Question, can you just tell us what you recall hearing about Brendan Dassey's involvement in the matter? Answer, my understanding is that Brendan Dassey is Stephen Avery's nephew, and it must have been October 31st or November 1st or something. He approached Stephen Avery's cabin home, whatever it was, and came into the property, and Teresa Hallbuck was there. And his uncle, I did not get all the details, but for some reason I think there was a sexual assault that took place, and after that she was murdered. This is all the information that I understand. And the body disposed of. Question, okay. And did you also hear, well, let me ask you this. What if I assume that you would consider that pretty damning evidence for Mr. Avery, against Mr. Avery? Answer, if this in fact happened, yes, I certainly would have to. Question, well, what if the state never called Brendan Dassey to the trial and you never heard that story from him? Would you be able to put that out of your mind and focus just on what evidence they do present? Answer, I think I would. As I understand, if we are instructed to be objective in our observation and observe and use only the evidence presented, I think that's what would have to be decided. Question. So you wouldn't assume necessarily that maybe there is other evidence out there and maybe that this is what happened, but they are just not telling me? You wouldn't look at it that way. Answer. I think as a jury you have to base your conclusions on the evidence presented. Question. Okay. Answer. And I think I would do that. Question. Okay. Hard as it may be, you think you could? Answer. Yes, I think I could. Question. Okay. Do you also recall then that Brendan Dassey later recanted that confession? That is, took it back? Answer. Yes, I'm aware of that. Correct. Question. And were you aware of any, well, strike that. Can you think of any reasons why somebody would falsely confess to something, admit that they did something like this when they really didn't? Answer. I can't think of any reason, but it seems as though I understand that there are some rather severe interrogation procedures sometimes done by investigators. I don't know if a person could be coerced into something like this or not. Question. Okay, that's something that you would be open to considering though, if you did hear that from Mr. Dassey or young Brendan Dassey. Is that right? Answer. I think I could be open to do that, sure. Question. Would you also consider whether or not any other evidence corroborated a story like that? Physical evidence or lack of physical evidence. Is that something you would consider? Answer. The story of Brendan Dassey's involvement? Question. Yes. Answer. If there was other evidence, I would certainly consider it. Question. And if there wasn't evidence that would corroborate it, in fact would tend not to? Answer. That has to be considered. I would assume, yes. Question. Yes. Well, if you have never been to a trial before, I know you've never been on a jury, but have you ever sat through a trial before? Answer. No, I have not. Question. As a spectator, do you ever watch court TV? Answer. No, I don't. Question. Well, you may or may not know, but a defendant has a constitutional right not to testify in their own case. Answer. I'm aware of that, yes. Question. Okay. And as a defense attorney always has sort of a difficult decision to make, which is whether or not they should call the defendant in the trial, whether they should testify or not testify, because there's always a concern that a defendant does testify and takes the witness stand, that a jury may not believe him anyway, because they will think, well, he's the person with the most at stake. Why should we believe him, right? Answer. Correct. Question. On the other hand, if he doesn't testify, then there's concern that some jurors may think, well, what's he hiding? Why doesn't he tell us his side of the story? We want to hear both sides. What about you? Would you have any concerns like that? Answer. I don't think so. I guess I could understand where, as you pointed out, a defendant would have a hard time being very forthright about the situation. I would think it would be difficult in these cases for them to testify. Question. By forthright, you mean convincing? Answer. Or honest, truthful. Question. You think a defendant would have a hard time being truthful or just being believably truthful? Answer. Either one. Question. Well, see, that's one of the concerns is that, if a defendant does testify and the jury just thinks, well, Attorney Kratz, Judge, I'm going to interpose an objection. I don't know if Mr. Buting is asking a question here or giving his closing argument. He can ask the question, Judge. He's gotten an answer, and now it's speech time, and I'm interposing an objection, telling this witness what the next problem is with his answer. The court. Well, the subject matter is legitimate. Why don't you rephrase the question, Mr. Buting? Mr. Buting. Okay. Question by Mr. Buting. Would you be able, if Mr. Avery did, With our advice, if we suggested that he take the witness stand and he testified in this case, would you tend not to believe him just because he's the defendant in a case? Answer: I suppose it would depend on the evidence presented prior to his testimony and, all right, frankly, if, and I'm sure he would not admit to the crime, if there's other evidence that would indicate, and I don't know what it could be, that it did happen and he was guilty of it, then I suppose a person would be a little inclined to doubt his denial. Question: okay, but my question is, looking at his testimony alone first, with the mere fact that because he is charged in this case and decides to testify, would you hold that against him and not, let's say any other witness testifies and the evidence that you were talking about that comes in earlier tends to contradict that witness. I assume you would have that same concern, right? Answer: correct. Question: so can you give Mr. Avery, if he does testify, can you give him the same benefit and the same consideration of it as any other witness who would testify? That is, consideration of whatever his motives would be to falsify, the consistency, or you would get as a jury instruction for any witness to judge the credibility, and you would have to apply it to the same for the defendant. Could you do that? Answer: yes, I think I could, yes. Question: and on the other hand, if Mr. Avery didn't testify, would you be sitting there thinking, aha, well, you know why not, he must be guilty, or what's he hiding? Answer: no, I don't think I would. I don't think that would make much difference. Question: okay, and in fact, the judge would instruct you that you are not to consider it in any way. Answer: right. Question: and you would be okay with that? Answer: mm-hmm. Question: you have to say yes or no. Answer: yes, I think I could, yes. Mr. Buting: all right, well, thank you very much, sir. Mr. Schuette: you're welcome. Mr. Buting: I appreciate it. Voir dire examination by the court. Question: Mr. Schuette, I just want to clear up a couple of things because I think some of the later questions were pretty long and I want to make sure I understand the answer. As Mr. Buting indicated, one thing the court will instruct the jury in this case is that if the defendant should choose not to testify, the jury cannot draw any adverse inference from that somehow indicates the defendant's guilt. If the defendant doesn't testify, the burden is still on the state to prove his guilt, beyond a reasonable doubt, and you would have to base your decision on the other evidence that came in. Could you follow that instruction? Answer: yes, I could. Question: and by the same token, if the defendant does testify, there's another instruction that I cannot remember verbatim, but essentially you have to treat him like any other witness and base your decision on his credibility, on the same factors you use for other witnesses, taking all the other evidence into account and other considerations, and decide whether you think he's telling the truth, just like any other witness. Can you do that? Answer: yes, I could. The court: thank you. The court will escort you from the courtroom. Mr. Schuette: thank you.